Okay, I got the sign, so I'm gonna start. First of all, thank you all for being here. This is awesome to have a group here, and I'm gonna dive in, and we're gonna go on a journey here through navigating the world of workflow automation. And thank you for coming, and in spite of this general, what sounds like a general topic, it's gonna get a lot more specific. So I'm going to start and tell you a bit about myself. I actually started using FileMaker in 3.0 when I was 12 years old. No joke. My father taught me how to use FileMaker. He is a citizen developer and a photographer, and he used a FileMaker database to manage his business and showed me how to edit layouts. And that is how I got my initiation into FileMaker. Little did I know at that point what my career trajectory would look like, but I went on to become a certified developer and started in FileMaker 9, certified through every version, and now I have every single badge that is possible. So I'm a big believer in pursuing what you love to do. I am now working for Portage-based Solutions and have been for the last 17 years. We are a Claris Platinum partner, the newest Platinum partner, and we have been developing custom apps for over 30 years. And I'm also a member of the Claris Partner Council. We have another member over there. Sorry, Rob, calling you out, but we are liaisons between the community and Claris, and I am always willing to communicate important issues to you. So please feel free to come up and connect with me, and I will put my contact information up at the end. And this is the fun part. Texifornian, probably won't find it in the dictionary yet, but this is a term I use to describe myself and my family. I'm originally from California, but I do currently live in Texas, so we're Texifornians. Oh, and one more thing, forgot to mention there. In order to show homage for my FileMaker roots, I'm using a lot of my father's photography. So you're going to see Wheeler Imaging, and so I've got some beautiful photos for you if you get at least that out of this presentation. And before I start, I also really like to thank people, because I'm not doing this all by myself, of course. So I really like to pay a tribute of thanks to my team of wonderful developers, project managers, and friendly staff at Portage-based Solutions. We are trying to open up our resources more to the community, and in an effort to do that, we turned one of our weekly dev meetings into a public podcast. So we're new to the podcast circuit. We have a new podcast called FileMaker DevCast, and I'm going to point out our host, Dan Smiley here. So he's here, so feel free to talk to him about the podcast as well. And we've had some really great guests from the community there. I'm also a member of WIT FM. If you haven't heard of it, check out our community room on the 4th floor. It is a fabulous nonprofit organization supporting women in tech, and it is a big reason of why I'm standing up here today. And also I want to mention Claris Beyond, which is a Zoom user group. And again, I'm seeing attendees as well, and members of that group that inspire me. We have a very international group, and if you haven't heard of that user group, please join us as well. So thank you to all these people, and I'm going to jump in. So, oh yeah, I guess that does cut off my slide a little bit. Whoops. Okay. Well, imagine you're on a beautiful hike is what that is displaying. So I'm going to ask you to use your imagination a little bit. So we're going on this beautiful hike when you come to a fork in the road. So you have a decision to make. And how do you decide what path to take? And if you sit back and ask yourself this question, if you don't know, what do you have to rely on? Your intuition? Maybe you've been on one of the paths before. Maybe you heard from a friend that, oh, this hike has a beautiful view from the top of the hill. Or, oh, the flood washed out this path, so don't take that route. Right? We have to gather some data in order to make this decision. And I'm using this analogy of a hike, of a navigation where you're having to make a decision point, because I think it applies to workflow automation. We are faced in a world of growing tech options. It is just immense. And I think in order to know what path you might want to choose, you have to know more about what your options are. And so that's what I'm going to take you through. I'm going to actually take you through 3 different paths where I built a workflow automation in 3 different products, and I'm going to show you how they compare. So here's a little outline of what's ahead. First, I'm going to show you a little bit about the landscape. I'm going to talk about current trends in workflow automation and what we need to pay attention to. Then I'm going to chart the course. So I actually took a poll from the community to get the results that are driving the contents of this presentation. So I'm going to show you the results and how that applies. And then lastly, I'm going to explore the route. So I'm going to actually show you the 3 different paths. And so I hope you enjoy the journey. And here we go. Actually, my husband took this picture from an airplane. All right, just to kind of set the stage here, I just want to get really clear on how I'm defining workflow automation. This is an example. Of course, it's taking a series of unrelated business applications and connecting them, removing or minimizing manual, interaction or dependence on manual, right? So, am I doing something wrong? And so it's really automating. As we say, it's hard not to use the word automation, the definition of workflow automation, but that's what I'm talking about here. So I looked at some trends, and I found this in Forrester's Q2 2023 Digital Process Automation Survey, and these statistics were really interesting to me. So I found that 75% of organizations expect people to engage in workflow automation. So there's a pretty high level that they're expecting people to already be doing this or these processes to be in place. But 57% of organizations admit that they lack a clear strategy. So then I'm noticing, well, that sounds like, yeah, there's not a lot of planning and insight into how these workflow automations are going to happen. And then this percentage, this statistic, 8% of organizations require training in process automation, means that even less is investing in that strategy. So we're kind of, however we're making these decisions, we aren't planning them out as well as maybe we think we are, although we admit there's a very high need for workflow automation. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the SaaS market because so many of these workflow automations are dependent on APIs and third-party applications, business applications that are SaaS products. So it's important to note just the growth of the SaaS market from 2015 to 2023, jumping from 31 billion to 208 billion. And this is not counting AI applications. So when we count AI applications now, it's really growing. So just considering all that as well, I think is important in the landscape of workflow automation. And a few definitions: SaaS, software as a service. What I'm talking about are products such as Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, MailChimp, QuickBooks, Slack. iPaaS is an integration platform as a service, a little less known of a term, but that's referring to products such as Zapier, Claris Connect, MuleSoft, SAP, and Integrately, and there's many more. And then the last definition is a really new one. This is embedded iPaaS. And this is what triggered my inspiration for this talk, because I was noticing that there were SaaS products on the market, and then they would have a tab or a button or somewhere that said integrate or automate or flow. And I thought, well, that sounds like iPaaS. And I noticed that there were a set of SaaS products that were building into their solution a feature that was allowing you to automate and integrate with others. So I started to see, well, wait a second, there's all these different paths, and how are you going to navigate and know which might be the best path to take? I know I'm used to building workflows in a certain way, but is this the most efficient? Am I staying up with the trends? So that's the question I asked myself. So I did a little research, and I came up with a number of the most popular business applications, SaaS products out there. In this diagram, I have FileMaker at the center, and that's because FileMaker is at the center of every project that I do, and I'm sure most of us can agree, right? So I'm taking FileMaker and I'm integrating it in some sort of workflow with all these other applications. And these applications have, or products or platforms, have a element or an embedded iPaaS in them. So I have them listed here in terms of Slack workflows, HubSpot workflows, Salesforce Flow, Atlassian Jira Automation. So they might have slightly different terminology, but they're all referring to the same thing. And so then, yeah, as I mentioned, this is really what got me excited about this topic and really curious. And so I wondered, well, what can I do with these tools? And how can I go about grasping and getting a better handle on what was at stake? And I love to play chess. We have a chessboard up in the Wood FM booth. But I really feel like this is the strategy. And my strategy was, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to build in 3 different ways so that I can test it out. So I wanted to chart the course. And this is where I went to the poll, I went to the community, and I decided that I would ask the community how they were using and creating workflow automation. So I created a poll, a survey, and I sent it out to the community over email and Slack. It just had 11 questions. I told people it would take 5 minutes to complete, and I got back 76 responses. Took people an average of 3 minutes and 53 seconds. So I was proud of that because I promised 5 minutes or less. And then I got respondents from, I think this is 5 continents here. So that was pretty cool. And I think that says something about our community too, the international aspect of it that I really appreciate. And here's some of the results. So I wanted to know, get some basic demographic data about who was taking this poll. This was mostly professional developers and business owners, along with some minorities and some citizen developer, manager, administrator. And also this group of people I wanted to know how experienced they were. Most people considered themselves advanced or intermediate, I guess kind of almost equal in those two, with a small percentage of beginner. And then I also was curious, what were the important outcomes and goals of creating workflow automation? So when you're designing workflow automation, what were you hoping to benefit out of it? And the top 2 answers were to streamline day-to-day operations and to reduce errors, followed by improved customer experiences. And there were several other answers, but I decided to narrow it down for this slide. And then yes, this question. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was talking to myself.
Can you go back a bit?
Oh, you want to see the slide?
Yeah, but the error reduction and streamline day-to-day will improve customer experience.
True. Yeah. So this question was very, I want to stop and think about this for a second, because it makes sense to me that FileMaker is the overwhelming majority. 68% of people said that they prefer using FileMaker for workflow automation, because that is the tool we're most familiar with. And so I think that links back to this analogy of maybe you just take the route because you know it, you're comfortable, you know what to expect. But I think FileMaker is a fabulous tool and it's getting better. And I also think it's so important to stop and assess, what are the tools in my toolbox? Is this the right tool for the job? Because sometimes it's not FileMaker. And Claris Connect comes up second at 16%. Then there was other iPaaS. Some people were using SaaS tools and that other percentage. So this was an interesting and telling statistic that I found out of that survey. So in order to determine when I was going to choose a platform to compare with, I asked people what were the most important factors when selecting a platform. And the 2 most popular answers were ease of use and security. So people were looking for a platform or product that was easy to use and was highly secure. So I used that data to drive my definition of an ideal workflow. So using this Venn diagram, I wanted to design something that had that perfect combination of ease of use and security. And I really love this photo. This is in Montana, I think he took it. So here's another visual, going back to our hiking analogy, but this is the pinnacle. How do we get there? And I want to take a moment here and address something that I think is really important in workflow automation, but not really the main the main content of this presentation, but it's ideal only if it's successful. So we need to consider what is at stake if workflow automation should fail or fail partially. And when you look at some of the common automated workflows, such as invoicing, sales orders, accounting reconciliation, payroll, if that should fail, that can be business critical. And you don't, so building these in a way that we're really taking care into the business processes that we're automating, because a lot can be at stake. And I wanted to make a short list of some of the potential errors that could happen when you're writing a workflow automation that you need to consider. If the FileMaker file is moved, if the webhook fails to send, the webhook is not received, API endpoints are changed, error emails are not sent, not received, server goes down. And this is definitely not exhaustive, and definitely there's no perfect world to how to do this. And there should definitely be more sessions, and maybe this is an inspiration for next time, do more about, error capture, because it's so vital to the success of an application. And if we don't capture for errors properly or prevent errors and some combination of both, then we're not really serving the purpose of the application, or the purpose of the people using the application, let's say. So I kind of use this to redefine the ideal workflow, now saying the ideal automated workflow is resilient and built on a platform that's easy to use and secure. And this is my updated Venn diagram showing now the intersection between ease of use, security, and reliability. So I needed one more piece of information before I could start building my workflows. And that was to know from the community, which business application are people most commonly integrating with, because I wasn't going to do this for every single application, because I think it would be too big of a scope for this presentation. So I asked people, had them rate which applications they were most commonly integrating with, and the answer that came up was with Microsoft 365. So I chose Microsoft Power Automate, as that was the linear connected product for the Microsoft platform in terms of iPaaS. And then I also wanted to know what type of business workflow people were most commonly building. Was it customer management, ERP integration, order management, facility or resource management, or sales or marketing? And for this, the most popular answer was order management. So now I had a basis for what I would build, and I decided I would build an order management workflow integrated with MS Outlook. So email as one of the Microsoft Microsoft 365 applications. So here's a little diagram of the workflow that I built. I used a third-party service called Tracking More that allows you to track delivery services, a very large number of delivery services. They have a free tier and a paid tier, and then they have a very easy to use interface for setting up webhooks, so that every time a delivery is sent or received or some sort of status update, a webhook can be sent. And I was interested in that because I wanted to test this as for a real-time workflow. So that the steps after the order was delivered, it would update a FileMaker database, update the status of that order in a FileMaker database. It would use Microsoft Outlook to send an email to the customer. Then the workflow would wait 3 days, and then it would email the customer a follow-up promotion based on the order that they had received. And I wanted to show you the Tracking More, just a little bit about it. This is their API status page. I can't remember the name of this service, but there's a lot of APIs out there that have this, and it's a really helpful and useful way for me to track the API stability. And this relates into what I was talking about when I was talking about reliability and building resilient workflows. If you have a service like this that's giving me direct feedback into when the service is available or not, or what kind of outages might be, this helps me, again, plan and prepare for a very stable workflow. So I found this really useful, and I can subscribe to updates and be alerted when changes are made. So now I had all the information I need, and I'm ready to explore the routes. So I decided I would build FileMaker, Claris Connect, and Microsoft Power Automate. And these are the factors I would use to compare and contrast between all of them, compare the features, how well, or the features in sending email using Microsoft, the ease of use, and the security, and those were drawn from the community poll, as I mentioned. So I did it. And these are the 3 workflows. So the first is a set of FileMaker scripts, although I didn't include a capture FileMaker server, but that is an element of this as well. The second, that is a Claris Connect flow. And the third is the Microsoft Power Automate flow, they call it as well. So let's start with FileMaker, as that is the most commonly used preferred path. And I'll show you some of the features in FileMaker. I really love the debugging tools in FileMaker. You know, we're just so used to using that script debugger. So it's easy for me to write code and then to go through and figure out where I might have errors or where I need to change my code. And I think we have a pretty powerful debugging tool within FileMaker. I'm also, designing my own error capture. The flexibility that we have in that code to capture different error codes, to take different actions based on errors. Again, you all know the flexibility built within that. So it's extremely flexible. I think one of the less than desirable parts is that when I'm writing a flow this complex, having to do with API integrations, it can be hundreds of lines of code because there's so many steps involved in authentication, in passing parameters. There's many things that are happening. So it can be kind of lengthy and hard to understand, perhaps. So that kind of leads to that ease of use factor. And like I said, in FileMaker Server, because Claris Connect natively cannot support webhooks, right? You cannot send a webhook to Claris or to FileMaker Server. It won't do anything. There's no way to receive it. So I'm reliant on a server-side script, a scheduled server-side script, in order to make this flow work. Now, I could have it run every 5 minutes if I want to and check for those new orders. Was there a new order delivered? Was there a new order delivered? That cannot, it's not always the most efficient way of doing things, but it's definitely possible. But it's again, the webhook is what we're really missing. And this was an interesting one too. In the way I wrote that workflow, I wanted the workflow to pause for 3 days, right? I can't do that in FileMaker Server because we have a timeout. Even if I don't check that checkbox for timeout, that is my max timeout, 14:39 minutes. So I can't pause for 3 days. It's just going to automatically cancel. So I really have to have 2 server-side scripts running. I have to have some more complex logic written in my scripts in order to check and then recheck. And so there's complexity that goes into writing that. In terms of send email, this is where I think FileMaker really has a leg up because we're using insert from URL in order to make any sort of API calls, which means I am using the MS Graph API, which is huge. It's a very robust API. It's well documented. And so any option that is available in that API is available to me in my FileMaker script. And so that's pretty powerful because I can do any sort of action that I might want to do within sending an email. And in terms of security, again, back to using insert from URL and curl, when I'm making my calls to my API in order to authenticate, I have to pass some sort of token or credentials, which means I'm responsible for storing those or creating those in a safe and secure way. So there is an FM security guide out there, and helpful for best practices in terms of storing those credentials and accessing them. But that's something that you, as the developer, are responsible for. So we have to take it upon ourselves to use those best practices. And we are also we're using FileMaker permissions. This has to do with, giving access to that code, right? That code that has to do with that workflow automation. It is all stored within my FileMaker file. So I'm reliant on FileMaker access permission sets and groups in order to determine who has access to that code. In order to use API integrations, you must enable SSL. You also have the option to verify SSL certificates using the insert from URL script step. And I'm the slide messed up there. All right. So with cryptography is also another important aspect to security in terms of API integrations, because often there might be data, that wants to be encrypted as it's being passed through. And so it's important to have access to these functions so you can encrypt and decrypt and hash and be able to read and write and validate information as it's being passed between multiple systems. And there's a lot of functions built within FileMaker to handle this. We can also build custom functions. So there's a lot of that is definitely, I'm using this coding system, by the way. So green star means great, got it all the way. This gray check mark is kind of like we're halfway there, or, note to self, you need to implement it. And then there's a red X, but we haven't seen it yet. In terms of compliance, there is no built-in compliance with FileMaker, but if you're using FileMaker Cloud, you are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant by default, because that's built into the product. And in terms of logging, another important aspect to security, there is built-in logging. There's server-side, there's access logs, there's script logs. There are built-in logging. You must enable those features and be familiar with how to work with them within FileMaker and FileMaker Server. But you can also build your own logs in your FileMaker product. And we actually have a free add-on. Portage Bay has a free add-on available in the marketplace where you can install a log, and then you have complete customizable options in how you want to implement it into your system. And in terms of ease of use, I wanted to mention that API integrations, here's the red X, easy to learn. Yeah, I would say API integrations are a pretty advanced tool set, or advanced skill set within FileMaker. So I wouldn't say they're really your starting point, but that they're possible, and it just takes some knowledge of JSON typically, and some advanced knowledge of APIs. We do have the ability to use add-ons or reusable code in FileMaker, which is a great asset, and I think it makes it easier to use. This is a picture of the Claris Marketplace, where you can find all sorts of add-ons, some free, some paid for, but that can definitely speed up and help you. If you don't know anything about API integrations, you can sometimes find an add-on for it and integrate with it. I think FileMaker has lots of flexibility. If anything, that could be like the core of it's flexible and lots of options. And if you're familiar with it already, you don't have a lot to learn, right? You already know how to navigate the scripts and the calculation engine and the layouts. And so this is a picture of kind of the different elements that go into the flexibility of that product. Versioning. So there is no built-in versioning for FileMaker. So if you're writing code and then you need to roll back to something that you wrote the day before, it's important that you design your own backup strategy in order to save those backups so you can manually roll back your code. And it's really easy to duplicate code. I find this a very essential part of ease of use, right? I want to be able to say, oh, I just want to put that over here instead, and I can just grab it, copy, paste, duplicate, do whatever I need to do with it. And as I mentioned before, the debug tools. I love the FileMaker debug tools. It's fun to work with them and speeds up the way I code and debug. So that's FileMaker. That was route A. And now we're going to take Claris Connect. So some of the features in Claris Connect. First of all, they take webhooks, right? So I'm able to receive that webhook that Tracking More is sending out each time an order is delivered. And then within Tracking More, they had another layer of security, which allowed you to validate that webhook to make sure you're not getting, possibly attacked, being sent a webhook that is not actually coming from the right source. So I can validate it using some of their cryptography utilities, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But that was a major benefit because, again, it led me to make a more secure connection and workflow. I think the FileMaker connector is one of the biggest benefits of Claris Connect because, like I said, FileMaker is at the center of everything that I'm doing. So knowing that I just put that connector, that flow step action in there, I put in the name of my database, my username and password, and then that's it. I don't even have to know the FileMaker data API, right? It's simple. The option to wait, that was what I mentioned about in FileMaker. I couldn't wait, right? So I had to build two separate server-side scripts. In Claris Connect, this is one flow, and I have it pausing for 3 days. So my flow will just sit there and wait 3 days, and then it will continue. So it simplifies the code. Like I said, it's easy to read because this is it. This is 10 lines. And for me, if I have to go tell somebody else, hey, debug this, it's not working, I don't have to kind of send them like, here, where are you going to go? It's like, this is it. And I find that really valuable in terms of communication and telling people, here's how you can work through it. And lastly, auto parse JSON. I don't know, how many people have used Claris Connect? Okay. So if you haven't, you should try the free level because it's fun to play with. But you can, if you don't know JSON, it auto parses. So as you get all of the pieces back from each response, so you want to grab some information from FileMaker. Here's the customer name and email. All of that is set in JSON, but it's all automatically parsed. So I can just point to the customer name, and then I want to populate that into my Outlook email. And it's like you can build this really fast. So that is a really strong feature. And talking about send email using Microsoft Outlook. So this is Claris Connect includes the basics when sending an email. We've got subject, body. I can specify whether it's in text or HTML. I've also got the ability to specify a CC, recipients, and I know there's a debate if it's a read receipt or read receipt, but you all know what I'm talking about. So those are the options, the only options right now with the Claris Connect send email. So a little bit limited. In terms of security, this is another really great benefit of using a service like this. I'm not managing any of the authentication, right? I'm clicking this button when I start my flow to sign into Microsoft Outlook. I'm signing in, and then I'm moving to the next slide. But I'm not responsible for that. I'm relying on Claris Connect to manage and store and secure those credentials for me, or using OAuth. It takes less of the pressure off me, and I can rely on the security of that product. In terms of permissions, there are currently 2 permission groups in Claris Connect. There is a team manager or a user. I think it would be great to have some more permissions there in order to share flows in a slightly different way. And I know this product, as we heard, is continuing to grow and change, and I'd love to see more changes in that area as well. Similar to FileMaker, Claris Connect does require you to use SSL to connect to your FileMaker solution, so you'll need to have it hosted on a secure server. And there are, as I mentioned before, the number of cryptography utilities. So built into Claris Connect, you also have a number of these utilities, which are pretty fun to play with as well. And they had the exact right utility that I needed in order to authenticate that key that I was getting from tracking more. So that was another useful feature built into the product that I might not have noticed unless I went in and was testing it this way. And Claris Connect is also SOC 2 Type 2, has a SOC 2 Type 2 report, so it meets that compliance, and it also has a number of ISO certifications. I think they're listed in that screenshot there. And it also maintains a 30-day history of logging. So I automatically, well, I have to turn it on in order to keep history. But once I have that set on, I have a 30-day history of each flow and step and as it was run and what it returned. So that's a nice way to be able to monitor it as well. And in terms of ease of use, I think Claris Connect is super easy to learn. This is a picture of some of the built-in connectors, and that's the best place to start because it's like, just go in there, start connecting these applications, and you can start building flows. I mean, literally within, I'm going to say 30 minutes because, you have to kind of get in and logged in and all that, but it's quick. Custom connectors are a new feature to Claris Connect as of, I don't know, several months at least. And they are pretty powerful because they allow us to extend beyond those built-in connectors. So if I want to build a very specific connector, or if I want to expand what that what that Outlook, MS Outlook connector could do, I can build a custom connector based on the Microsoft Graph API, and I can build out any of those options that I want to. Again, this is a slightly more advanced skill set, but they made it easier for us, but you do need to know JSON. I would say be pretty comfortable with JSON in order to work with custom connectors. I think Claris Connect still has flexibility, but a little less flexibility. Now, a lot less flexibility than we have with FileMaker. It's a different product. The interface is relatively simple, which has its pros and cons, right? Because it's easy to find what I'm looking for. There's not a whole lot to find and to look for, but then there's less options. So it's this trade-off. With versioning, they did build a nice versioning into the product, so I can actually roll back to previous versions of a flow that I may have written and needed to access or go back to. So that's a nice feature as well. And I can also duplicate entire flows, or I can duplicate steps, which is helpful if I'm building a lot of if clauses there and need to test different things. And we have the ability to test an entire flow under certain conditions. And in order to test, we can always test an action by itself, which I also find really powerful because sometimes I'm needing to go in and just got to get this part working, so without having to run the entire flow. That's it for Claris Connect. And now I'm going to dive into Microsoft Power Automate. And for Microsoft Power Automate, I wanted to point out some features. There's a lot of features in Microsoft Power Automate. One of them was the ability to do schema validation, which again would be really excellent for security and preventing some sort of, again, false data or false payload being sent. So that could be important to use. There's also toggles for secure inputs and outputs, another added security feature. I did find the workflow, the flow was a little bit difficult to read, and partly that's because how the user interface uses this flowchart style, and I can't rearrange the elements or tighten them or grow them. I can zoom in and out, but in the way it was written, I may have wanted to see it in a different way, and I didn't have a lot of flexibility over that, and I found it difficult to read. So personal preference, perhaps, but for me, I didn't enjoy that factor. There are some really nice on-error options. So each time, this is an example of a step. So send delivery confirmation to customer. So that's using the Outlook send email. Now I can check different boxes. So if it's successful, do this. If it's timed out, do that. If it's skipped, do that. If it's failed, do that. So it's a little bit more flexibility than we have with Claris Connect, where we're simply, there is an error capture, but it's really on error, do this. And I don't really know what the error is. And then in FileMaker, of course, we can capture for all different sorts of errors. And there was also a nice feature allowing me a lot of flexibility over the retry options. So in Claris Connect, again, I their retry policy is documented, and I can't bring it up off the top of my head, but there's one retry policy. So if a step in the flow fails for some reason, it's going to keep retrying. In MS Power Automate, I could specify between none, an exponential interval, or a fixed interval. So I had more options over that. So this was what was difficult, again, for me in working with Microsoft Power Automate, is that I had to manually parse the JSON. So in here, I'm showing you the first part of the flow where I'm having to, and I'll show this other part of it as well, but I'm having to first make a call to initialize the FileMaker Data API session, and then making a call to parse the JSON, and using some of those results in order to find the FileMaker record by ID. So it's because we don't have the built-in FileMaker connector, I'm manually doing these steps. And I realized that really made it a little cumbersome to work with. And that's why I said one of the main benefits of Claris Connect is having the built-in FileMaker connector. When it came to send email, I was really curious to see, well, how would MS Power Automate compare with this, given that Microsoft Outlook is the natural product for them. So we've got, again, the very typical subject, body, carbon copy to send from. That was a new one. BCC, attachments, unlimited attachments, sensitivity, reply to. So again, there was just more options in how I wanted to craft that email. And input options, that went too fast, and share from a shared mailbox as well. So again, just a greater variety of settings for me to be able to specify how I want to use email in there. And of course, change connection was another one. So instead of, you can see it there at the bottom, instead of that's my account, but I could change it to any other account that I wanted to be able to send from. In terms of security, similar to Claris Connect, MS Power Automate is managing all the authentication and security in terms of those connections. So I didn't have to build any of that. I was just relying on, I am storing, you can see here, these are the credentials in order to use basic authentication to connect to the FileMaker Data API, but I'm storing that within the Microsoft Power Automate product. So I'm relying on them to take care of that. There are a few different permission sets. There's owner, user, and run only as well. So again, those are the permission options in terms of giving somebody access to that flow and what's in there. Similar to the other products, it does require SSL as well, and cryptography. So this was interesting. I actually gave this presentation, something very similar to it, in November. And in November, I was building this flow, and I was looking for a way to use that that hash function in order to decrypt the key that I was getting from tracking more, and there was no way to do it. So this had a red X, and now I did discover since then that now there's a new third-party connector available. So I have to pay additional to get that service. It's an additional fee. But now I can say it's there, and I gave it the green check, meaning it's there, but maybe not perfect. And this is what it is. And Microsoft definitely has an impressive compliance list. So again, that's why I say, you can pretty much safely rely on them to keep your secret safe. And they also have a 28-day run history, so that logging automatically kept for 28 days if I want to access and view how the runs took place. For ease of use, I would say, again, it's not super easy to learn simply because you need to know JSON quite well, and you need to know the FileMaker Data API in order to make these connections, because there's no built-in connector. So I'm having to rely on that. There are custom connectors available, so you can build your own connectors in in Microsoft Power Automate, which, I could have built my own custom connector, but it would have to be specifically for my solution. So I don't know. I could see use cases for doing that. I didn't go down that route. And Again, this is a more of an advanced tool set. The flexibility in the product, it's a complex product. There's a lot to it. And again, a lot of options, a lot of elements to it. They are, this is a product that, again, like this screenshot I took, I had to update recently because it's changing. And now there's a new interface on the homepage to using an LLM right here to an AI to allow you to describe and prompt. Here's what I want to build, and it will start building that, or at least. But I tried it out. It's not perfect, like a lot of what we're discovering, but they're trying it out, and it's interesting to see. But I think it takes a lot to learn this because there are a lot of options and to be comfortable with it. For versioning, there's no built-in versioning, but you can manually export flows and then import them. So again, kind of like a backup strategy, it's on you to do that if you need to do any kind of version monitoring. And there was no way to duplicate a step. And that was a real pain when I was building the FileMaker Data API and parsing the JSON and just having to manually rebuild all those when I really just wanted to duplicate something and then modify it. And I could not test one step at a time. I had to test the entire flow. And I found that cumbersome to work through because I didn't want to keep running the entire flow. I just wanted to get this one piece working. So kind of hard from a developer's perspective. So here's a grid consolidating the answers, or, not the answers, gives me my subjective analysis of security. And I've done the same thing for ease of use. You can see how that's all built up. And if you want to compare some other factors, this is assuming you have a FileMaker license, which again, because FileMaker is a central part of everything we're doing, you wouldn't be paying anything extra in FileMaker, right? This is built in. Claris Connect, you would be paying roughly, starting at $55 a month. There is the free tier, but probably it wouldn't have enough flows that you would need to actually use this in production. Microsoft Power Automate runs currently $15 per user per month. Another factor you might want to use to compare is the platform age, maturity. I think I got the 40 years right for FileMaker, but maybe somebody can validate that for me. 12 years, I put that in terms of, I think we've been able to integrate with APIs for about 12 years. Claris Connect has been around 5 years, and Microsoft Power Automate 8 years. So I'm bringing you back to this slide here about which path you might take. And I think that really the answer is it's up to you, right? There's so many factors that go into this, and that's what I learned really going through this was, well, it's really going to depend on what the customer needs. What are the most important outcomes that I'm looking for? Or is security really the most important thing? Is real time the most important thing? And that would be how I would go about making the decision in choosing which path to take. But I feel like I got so much more information about, now I can really see all of this lined up. But I think that's why I put the question back in your court is we all have to choose which path is right for you depending on the circumstances and what you might be looking for. And in closing, I just wanted to mention, remind everybody that like so much of tech right now, I feel like this landscape is rapidly shifting, and that it's important to think outside the box, right? We always get comfortable doing things in one way, perhaps, but I think it is so essential that we consider all the tools in our toolbox and take time to think about them and consider, well, maybe I should pick up a new tool. And I'm really happy to be able to share what I learned with you all. And as promised, here are some QR codes. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, join the Claris Beyond user group, or check out our FileMaker DevCast. I'll leave those up for a second. And that's all I've got. So. Yeah, I guess I have time for some questions if anybody. Yes.
Have you ever used Zapier?
A little bit. Have you?
Not with FileMaker.
With other stuff?
Yeah, I love it, but I can't do it. So haven't put forth the effort.
Yeah. I know, I have not used it with FileMaker as well. So again, yeah, it would be interesting to test that hypothesis as well in that avenue, but I think we would be faced with the same issues with Microsoft Power Automate, where you're having to manually build those API, data API connections. Yeah.
Used NA10
I played around with it a little bit.
because that has the connector.
Oh, it does. Oh. You want to speak about that for a minute?
No. That's a good alternative.
But you like using it.
We use that, yeah, and Claris Connect.
Okay.
Changeably.
Okay. See, I feel like this could be more of a workshop. We could all bring our workflow platforms and then just compare and contrast notes, because it's like,
Wait, there's a FileMaker, a beta FileMaker connector for Zapier.
yeah, is it still in use?
I don't know.
I did hear about that. I haven't used it though.
I used it just to test some stuff and it worked fine,
Mm-hmm.
except that I was getting stuff back just as a text file, just straight lines of text.
Oh.
Jason,
Yeah. So then you wonder, well, is that product being supported? Is it going to work? Is it going to fail? Right. So those are all the factors we have to consider when you're really trying to automate something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.